Washington State? Whoa, that's like rare these days.
I was like, I really need to. My dad lives there.
Oh, okay.
Hey.
Like Washington State or the Seattle area?
He lives in Seaback, so like 4 hours from Seattle.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, cool. So I came to the South when I was 18 years old, and I was a huge culture shock. I came in 2005. Where I was from, I had the internet when I grew up with a computer, so I had the internet when I'm like 1993. I got my own email as a little 6-year-old. Came out here, some people had not even heard of computers yet in 2005 when I moved to Florida, which isn't even a deep South. And so a lot of culture shock. I actually had more culture shock coming to the South than I actually had going to Asia. So, so people, no, culture shock is fine. Because people think they think I'm a little weird. I think they're weird. I drink coffee at 9 p.m. They're always. I was actually really confused when I first came here. I was like, everybody's hitting on me. I'm like an 18-year-old kid. I'm like, calling me babe, sugar pie, lumpkins, every single dessert. It's just bizarre. So it's a different culture. And one of the things I love is different cultures. And something I've learned about the South is Seattle is not a sports-oriented place. It is now because the Seahawks won a game like 6 years ago or something, and everybody's like, I am a fan for life. Bandwagon fans. There was not a Seahawk fan in sight, so don't even believe them. But I grew up in a Southern Baptist church that was turned into an independent Baptist planted in Seattle. And I grew up my whole life hearing about things like idolatry, for instance. And every Sunday morning, my Tennessee pastor would get up there and be like, "Well, we don't have idols here in America, but we do have one thing. We have one thing that you're not here on Sunday morning for, and that is football." And that's what they would tell me an idol is. And so, as I went to Bible college and started to feel this call to go and learn about missions, I eventually went overseas and saw that there's a lot of people who actually worship idols of wood and stone. And we always talk about idols of the heart, which are definitely true, but there are still people who try to kill me over here. Okay. Still people who wake up in the morning and that's their God. So I actually realized one of the challenges is people can't see this. So I do a lot of things overseas, from discipling people to working at a school where we use English to teach the Bible. But the thing we're working on the most right now is launching a media platform so we can take different people from around the Pacific Rim, different mission boards, and just show what God's doing. And so a bunch of amateurs, we spent about $8 grand, bought a bunch of camera equipment, and trained every single day for the last like 3 months. And this is the first video we made, a little terrible quality. But this is just from one day of filming. Well, some of the beginning stuff isn't, but it'll be from one day of filming in Taiwan. And one of the things is that the ending's a little bit long, and it's a little bit hard to watch if you really understand. Taiwan is a culture where people actually believe when they die, somebody has to go to the temple and worship for them. And if they don't do that, they're going to basically live in a literal spiritual hell. So their entire time, the Taiwanese, from birth to death, they're focused on success and the success of their children. And that's actually created a culture where for every birth you have 2 abortions, lowest birth rate in the world. And it's created a culture where people are absolutely obsessed with worshiping false gods. And you just don't see that anymore. It's one of the few kind of last bastions of that. So we went and filmed some of this, and I'm going to open up with it because I've actually never had a video to show before, so this is exciting. It's always been PowerPoint. I just want you guys to see a little bit of what we deal with in Taiwan and what's going on there. And if it's too quiet, I don't know if you want to.
Right, turn it up, yeah.
Yeah. See how that happens? Yeah.
You want it louder?
We'll see.
My name is Jake, and this is my Taiwan story. We come as a staff to a local tea shop. Everything's steeped in Asian culture. And I see my wife Emily, who I met in Taiwan. And at that moment, I'm looking around and I think, I'm so glad I got on that plane. In Taiwan, we use English as a hook to get students to come to our program. Our students study the scriptures and live amongst Christians. Some of them are Buddhist. Some worship their ancestors. Some of our students are Christians who just want to grow. As simple as it is, our ministry is relationships. I said yes to God 7 years ago when I got on a plane and came to Taiwan to do CCI. I met my wife, my best friends, but I owe my life today to the simple act of going. It was by no means an easy journey. In fact, it cost me a lot. But the faces you see, eating, laughing, living, these are families and friendships forged in the trenches of ministry. In Taiwan, we do many things. Teaching, media, building out new ministries. Honestly, it's not hard to find a place. When you come here, the goal is to show people that the best life is one with Christ. I often get asked what our greatest need in Taiwan is. And I'm a little bit torn because I don't want a soft song and some emotional gut punch to make you think it's God's will to come here. But I need you to see that idol worship is real. There are lots of people who've never heard about Jesus, destined for hell, and the numbers are countless. Look at this boy, this woman, these faces. You know they've never heard. They don't even know the name of Jesus. They've never felt that warmth and joy and peace that comes from having a relationship with God. None of them know Him. And worse yet, there's no end but terror for them. Imagine for a second putting your life, your eternity, your hope into statues of wood and stone, into rituals and demons. And so these people build and cry out and worship, but the gods are silent. And I need that thought to overwhelm you. I need you to be broken for a people that live without hope, that fear spirits of the dead in the dark of the night, that think the world to come is horrific. And without Jesus, it will be.
Not a lot of people know about Taiwan. There's about 2 Christians for every 100 people. One of my spiritual gifts is compassion, so if my body's crying, it's okay. I'm not dying. I'm not dying. And every day we walk past people who that's their hope. Gods of wood and stone. And that was our first day filming. Like, we're better at our jobs now. Like, we get better shots, but we just went out and filmed, and that's what you see on the streets. You see a place absolutely captured by idol worship. But the thing that is so different about it is Taiwan's not a third world country. That's what people think when they hear that name. Is he made in Taiwan? They think of factories. Taiwan's a first world country. We talked this morning with a person born in Taiwan who's 69 years old. Looks like he's like 40. He's a pastor from a Chinese church around here. And he was a chemical engineer, came over here. Taiwan, when the Taiwanese people come to America, they're the #1 most educated and the #1 most well-paid people group. But there's a lot of things going on in that country. And so I just want to talk to you guys a little bit tonight about what we do and what the country's like. But my big heart for you guys is that you'll understand a little bit about why we do missions, and why you can do missions even here in Louisiana or anywhere else. Definitely Washington State, they need Jesus there. Very unreached. So we had a vision to raise our support, and with support raised missionary. My wife and I are at about 67%. We actually work full-time jobs as missionaries, and then when we're done, we work more so we can support ourselves because we live off half a salary right now. So we work from 9 in the morning till 5, and then when that's done, we teach from 6 to 10 for a secondary job. And we want to live like the Taiwanese, and we eventually want to move there and reach the heart. Taiwan's a very beautiful place. These are all photos taken by my friend Bill. And it's got some of the most beautiful beaches in the world. It's a wonderful place to visit. We run a school called SYME, which stands for 圣经有义满全英文, which probably doesn't mean much to you, but that means Bible, friendship, discipleship, English. And the whole goal of our school is we know people in Taiwan are really educated, and they're actually pretty wealthy. The people I live around have more money than I do. But they want to learn English. And the schools there, you can go to a university and you can get a teacher who has never been to America and learned English at a university from somebody who's never been to a Western country and learned English at a university, to the point where you're getting maybe 3rd generation English training. And you're getting a degree in that. You know grammar and you know vocabulary, but you can't talk. And it's a shame-based culture. I went to school there, and I went to learn Chinese, so I went for a year so I can say great stuff like 我是外国人, I am a foreigner, or 我是胖死了, I'm so fat I'm going to die. That's a common thing I tell people because I'm morbidly obese in Taiwan. It's great. But we created a school, and the whole idea behind it is we're not going to teach you English, but we're going to facilitate an environment where you can speak with American teachers for 12 hours a day. Doesn't matter if you're Buddhist, it doesn't matter if you're Christian, but you're going to go through the Bible, and you're going to learn the Word of God. And you would think that wouldn't work, but their religious system is syncretic. They're not offended by the idea that they come to a school and I teach them the Bible. And if it's a competitive place to be, if they learn English really well and they learn how to speak, then they're okay with it. So we have a lot of students who are Buddhist who actually come to our school, and over the years as they learn the Bible, they go through 4 semesters. A lot of them start to hear the story of Jesus. And like I said before, it's an idol-worshipping country, and we'll talk a little bit in a bit about how Jesus kind of solves that one issue they have, but that's what our main ministry is. We wake up in the morning and we do a family time together, and we go through the scriptures as a group, and then we go through some English conversation classes, and then we have a chapel time. Every day they sit underneath that chapel message, and we make our students prepare the chapel. So they don't do the preaching, but they do scripture memory verses, games, and on Wednesday nights we do have them run a Bible club. Nothing is weirder than having somebody who's Buddhist run a Bible club and preach, but sometimes we don't have enough students who are Christians, so that's what they do. It's interesting. We have students who will do evangelism on the streets. They'll actually become Christian because they're sharing a story that they don't believe in, but they understand it the more they share it. It's a very unique way to do ministry. So I moved over there with a 2-year plan, learn Chinese, get established, partner with our school, Shanjin Yoi Manchun Yuan. And we have a 5-year plan. And one of that is to develop a media program, to build a discipleship program, and then hopefully start pursuing a master's degree. Because my wife and I, we both have bachelors, but we'd like to increase that. And we have a long-term plan, and that's basically this. I say from the trenches to the war room. There's a lot of places in life, and this is something that actually will help all of you no matter where you're at. You should decide and be thinking through where you're going to end up in life. Are you a soldier who's going to be teaching Sunday school in the trenches? Or do you want to be an officer running a church, or a pastor, or something along those lines, or running over people in the way that you manage them? Or do you want to be a general, mobilizing groups of people? And it works from everything from a job to ministry. And for us, we look and we want to be generals. We want to have schools. We want to have many, many people come to know the Lord. And our goal is to make Taiwan a hub, an engine for creating missionaries and pastors to go out into what we call the 1040 window, which is one of the largest population centers with the least amount of Christians. And we believe that as a country, you have people who are highly educated, extremely wealthy, and when they get the gospel, they're willing to go. And we think it's the key to reaching places like China and those types of countries. So that's one of our goals is, long term, we want to reach the world through Taiwan. So this is my wife, Emily. This is the longest we've ever been apart. So, well, before I met her, there's a good 20-something years. But afterwards, we work with a mission board called Word of Life. Unfortunately, the abbreviation for my degree is a Bachelor of Science in Religion, which doesn't sound very professional. But we both went to college. That's very important for the Taiwanese. Education is everything to them. They want to know that you have some sort of education, and so we always have to be thinking, oh, we're going to further it. And we met actually because I led a student to the Lord named Paul, and he was in Taiwan, and he went to Florida, and I'm from Seattle, Emily's from Florida, and he met her at the same Bible college that Travis and I went to, and this student, Paul, prayed for her. He met her and said, this is the person I want to be in Taiwan someday. So he prayed for months and months for her to go to Taiwan, and one day she was talking to Paul and said that she wants to go to Taiwan, and he's like, yeah, I've been praying for that, and he burst into tears. He was so moved by the fact that God moved that way. So Emily came to Taiwan, and that's actually how I met my wife. So it was really neat. I got to lead somebody to the Lord who actually wrote me a letter and said, Mr. Jacob, you're the reason I know Jesus. And then he's the reason I know my wife. So we kind of traded, did each other a solid. Right? We got married 4 years ago. You can see Travis over there, dressed like the Hobbit. Who's on the right. And we got married in Florida, since that's where she's from. And so 4 years. It's crazy. So when people think of Taiwan, this is what they generally think of. Now, spoiler alert, you saw some buildings, but most people think that I live in a hut. Some people are like, you ride a horse to work every day, and I was like, I'm not going to correct you. And it makes sense. Your grandparents or parents were born at a time when they went to Vietnam, or they went to Korea, or they went to the Pacific Islands. That's their experience of Asia. It wasn't how it is today. But there's been rapid development. And so this is the Taiwan I live in. This is the building, the view from my roof. I live on the 20th story of just an incredible apartment building. We have a great quality of life. It's a wonderful place to live. And as you can see, it's a pretty dense place. We actually, if you look at the amount of landmass that's actually usable, and you look at the amount of people, you could qualify it as the second most densely populated country on Earth, because only 1/4 of Taiwan is usable to actually build on. But if you look at it as a landmass, it moves a little bit up the chain. But there's 3,000 apartment complexes in my neighborhood. It's insane. Lots of people. This is a typical Taiwanese street. If you have seizures from a lot of information and flashing lights, it's not the best place because it is information overload. And our director does have epilepsy, so He's actually very fortunate. I've had problems with that sometimes. But it's tons and tons of advertisements, flashing lights. It's a lot like Blade Runner, if you've ever seen that. And people drive scooters, and generally you're going to live above a business. So I live above a 7-Eleven and a coffee shop, and lots of people, you just basically live in an apartment above stuff. Living above a 7-Eleven is really common. They have the most in the world, and I think the furthest in the country you can get away from a 7-Eleven is like, if you get up into the high mountains, it's like 5 kilometers. But if you actually understand Taiwan, at the end of like that block there's a 7-Eleven, and if you go this way there'll be another 7-Eleven or a comparable convenience store. It's actually a huge thing for how you live there. So I pay all my bills there. I order my bus tickets there. I pay parking tickets if I. They're not tickets for parking, but they charge you, and then you go to 7-Eleven and pay for it. You can deliver packages there. It's actually wrapped up a little bit with the government. It's kind of a weird thing.
Do they still sell Slurpees?
No, actually, they used to. We used to call them Sula Bean, which Bean means ice, but I don't know what Sula means. And then they stopped selling them. So they struggle to sell American products. It's probably one of the least westernized countries you'll go to. You'll go to lots of countries that don't have infrastructure, don't have good internet, but they have Dr. Pepper. You know, like you go to like So Taiwan is making inroads. We just received Mountain Dew like 2 weeks before I left. So they're receiving a lot of Western products, but they don't let the Western culture change them very much. Part of that's because of the political situation. They're responsible for a lot of technology. At one point, 80% of laptops were manufactured there. Many of the tech companies you hear about are actually from Taiwan or are started by Taiwanese individuals. And they get around a lot of times. This is an MRT being built. MRTs they're basically above ground subways, and they'll go below ground. We have one being built in our city, and when I first moved there years ago, I did an internship for 2 years. We didn't have anything like that, and now I basically have this giant, massive subway right in front of my house, so I can take the train to IKEA and Costco from board. And we have a Taiwanese proverb. The Taiwanese will eat anything with legs except for tables and chairs. And I would challenge you to disprove that. If they're like literally anything. They did ban eating dogs and cats, which I'm very happy. Especially because sometimes they'd be like, hey, do you want to try Little Tiger? I'm like, I know that's not a little tiger. That's a house cat. So they banned that. They were the first Asian country to do that because they're very progressive. They're one of the most democracy-driven countries. That's really good, and that allows for a lot of freedom. It does cause social issues. They just voted in gay marriage about 2 weeks ago, and it's very controversial because the Taiwanese who aren't Christian still don't want that because of just the conservativeness of Asian culture. So a lot of families too are dealing with that right now. But it's also it's a huge struggle too, because compared to China, which is communist, a lot of people who are Christian are also very proud of the fact that they can vote in laws for freedom and they don't have government control. So you have to be very sensitive to these issues, because for them it's not just about morality. Oftentimes it's actually about, oh, we're our own political country who makes our own decisions. So I've probably ate everything you're going to see there, which is mostly squid. And this is a typical stall you might see on the road. Taiwan has some of the most amazing food in the world. We just don't show that to people because nobody really wants to see that. They want to see the weird stuff. So if you look in that little left corner, those are little squares of blood jello. They do eat a lot of blood. I've ate pig's blood, duck's blood, chicken liver, chicken heart, chicken butt, which isn't actually the butt, but it's the little triangle on the butt, although they do eat the butt. And then basically anything that comes from an animal, they'll eat. The thing though is, if you're a foreigner and you visit, there's no pressure to do that. They might be like, hey, you want to try a chicken foot? And they're mostly just like trying to gross you out. But they know it's weird, they know it's different. But the Taiwanese are very, very, very thrifty. And part of that comes from, they're one of the few countries which in the 50s, 60s was under martial law, was under dictatorship, and they actually voted in democracy. So the person we actually met with today, who's 69 years old, he would have grown up in a different Taiwan. He would have grown up in a Taiwan where he was afraid that China was going to attack, and China was actually shelling the islands close to it, where people could get shot in the streets for being out at the wrong time. But the Taiwan that I'm in is actually the second safest country in the world. Like, I've never felt safer than being in Taiwan. And New Orleans, I do not feel as safe as Taiwan. But incredibly safe. People are wonderful, they're very sweet, and they're very peaceful. You give China a bunch of land and a bunch of guns, they want to take other countries over. You give Taiwan a bunch of that stuff, they're like, why do we need this stuff? I just want to eat. That's what they do for fun. They're peace-loving people. And it's very interesting because you deal with some of the most good, moral people that you'll ever meet, but morality doesn't save you. Morality doesn't get you to heaven. Morality doesn't get you a relationship with God. And that's a struggle sometimes for people to understand because they're really sweet, wonderful people. But as you dig deeper, you realize that they're like ensnared. So this is a typical temple. The temple looks almost exactly like the temple in Israel. And a lot of their traditions and a lot of their rituals echo it. For instance, every New Year, they put red letters over the door of their houses, and then they write stuff on it. And that red banner is supposed to protect them when the spirit called the Nian comes over to take their children. And there's a very real possibility that that's the Jewish celebration of Passover at some point made its way into Chinese culture, or something similar. You get rituals like that. And it's very difficult because they're one of the oldest cultures, so sometimes you don't know what comes from what. But their temple system for Chinese ancestor worship has a lot of similarities, and they really understand the biblical idea of going to a temple, and that's where you find your gods. And you'll actually see them carry gods to other temples so that gods can kind of hang out. It's kind of a interesting thing. They launch fireworks to scare off spirits, and they live in a ton of fear, like just overwhelming amounts of fear. And part of that is that they're very superstitious people. They believe, for instance, in this summer, in about a month, we'll have what we call Hell Month. And the city is going to fill with smoke. People are going to burn stuff on the streets every single day. And what they're literally trying to do is appease their ancestors. And they believe that the gates of hell have opened up, and they worship and they worship and they worship because they think if they don't do that, that spirits are going to get them. And then on top of that, they find that actually worshiping can give them power. So here's an example: people actually dressed up as he's a tiger, or one's a dragon, or they might have different cults you'll see. And you'll actually find some temples realize things are evil and worship it. Some temples worship gods that are actually very similar to what we call Christian gods. It's a very complex religion. And to be honest, my Chinese isn't good enough to always have an accurate take on it. I need to learn more to be able to understand that. But as I've learned, I've noticed that their ideas of what they would worship is very different. Like, they're okay with worshiping things that we would consider evil because in their worldview, they want the most powerful God, the most successful God. They don't really care necessarily about the morality of it. So sometimes you'll find that, or you'll occasionally encounter people who believe in curses and witchcraft and doing those sorts of things. So this here is called Hell Money, and during Ghost Month, which is in about a month, they burn this. And what they basically do is they exchange real money for fake money, and the idea is when you burn it, it goes to the afterlife, and your ancestors get it. And it's really oppressive, but it's also really weird. I asked one of my students what they use it for, and they said lawsuits. I guess there's a lot of lawsuits in the afterlife. But the basic idea, though, is that if you don't take care of your ancestors, they're gonna haunt you. They're gonna curse you. Anybody here see the movie Coco?
Yes. Yeah.
So imagine Coco's religious system. It's very similar, but the difference is that it's a very negative take on that. So it's the same idea. You have to remember people or they won't exist. But instead of them being like, "Oh, I'm so glad to see you, a little Paco," they're instead, when your grandmother dies, it's a vengeful spirit. You actually aren't allowed to cut your fingernails. You can't cut your hair because if you do that and they come and they don't recognize you, they're going to curse you. So they don't have the same type of feeling of like, oh, it's family and it's all great that you see in that. They do the same stuff, but it's more like if they don't do this, they're going to be oppressed. And so it's kind of a very interesting culture to step into. And some of our students really, really believe it. Others just go to the temple because that's what their parents say. Some say they're Buddhist, some say they're Christian, but there's a lot of different views and intermingling because it's syncretic. So it's actually like trying to nail down Jello sometimes to see what people believe. So that basically brings us to what we do, and that's we are there building relationships. And Taiwan is one of the most relational fields that you would ever see in missions, and part of that is because they really value connection and building relationships over time, and you have to learn to maintain those relationships. You have to learn to not offend people. They have concepts of face, which is kind of like doing the right thing to look a certain way and not doing the other thing. They don't want to offend you. And lots of different stuff with that. So we spend a lot of time just hanging out with our students. We go watch Endgame with them. We hang out with them on weekends. If they want to go to the internet cafe and play video games. Or they don't really play sports that often, but it is fun and hilarious when they do it. But the reason that relationship building is so effective is because it's not like relational evangelism in the U.S. And I would actually challenge you, if you think about the idea of like relational evangelism, in the U.S. we think of it as, oh, you know, I'm gonna be friends with Bill over here, and you know, we're just kind of, I don't know, we're gonna go smoke on the porch and be a real cool guy, and then when Bill's cousin dies, I'm gonna be like, surprise, I'm a Christian. You know about death? That's relational evangelism in the U.S. Relational evangelism in Taiwan, we set the stage. We say, hey, listen, I am going to offend you by virtue of what I believe. I'm going to get things in my culture and my religion that it's going to make you upset. But I'm going to be there for you when things go bad. I am a spiritual person, and I'm who you go to if you want somebody who's going to love you and care for you. And that's the stage we set when they first meet us. There's none of that pressure about like, I got to tell them I'm a Christian. We don't have that sort of pressure because people know I'm a teacher, I'm a Christian, and it's actually a really neat way to live. I'd actually encourage, if you meet someone and you struggle with that, tell them right off the bat. Say like, hey, just so you know, just really briefly, I'm a Christian and my worldview is going to conflict with your worldview. But I'm not going to abandon you. I'm not going to get upset at you. I'm not even going to judge you, but you have to know that I believe things differently from you. And it's weird to try that in American culture, but it sets the relationship right. So years later, when things happen, they come to you because they know that you're a spiritual person. And if they don't come to you, or if they're offended, there's a good chance that relationship would have been doomed the more you live what you actually believe and want to live out. So you would have just been investing in something that probably wouldn't be that fruitful. So most of our teachers are actually retired and volunteer and come over there for about 2-month terms. And I just want to share one story about one of our retirees. He's not drowning her, there's a baptism. So this is Mr. Macaluso. So the thing about Jesus is, imagine your whole life, you have this idea of like, you're looking for a way to sacrifice. And if you don't have the right type of children that are successful, they're not going to sacrifice for you. And then imagine you hear all of a sudden that this God sent his son, and he sacrifices, but his sacrifice pays for everything. And it doesn't just pay for everything. You don't have to live in fear of spirits. You actually become a child of God. You have assurance of the afterlife. You don't have to worry that your kids are going to have to live a certain way. That message is beautiful. And one of the things we find is when the Taiwanese actually become a Christian, that message of just the gospel to them is just this incredible answer to the question they've been asking their whole life: who will sacrifice for me? And it makes our job easy. I don't spend a lot of time talking to people trying to convince them God's real or do this or that. We don't argue. We just go through the scriptures together, and a lot of them at some point just say, this is so much more beautiful than the world I live in and what I believe. And to us, it's amazing because we have one of the few mission fields where I don't have to work to convert people. There's just not enough people talking to them about Jesus. And the thing is, when the Taiwanese become Christians, everything changes. So this is Vicky. She was my student, and she has gotten out of the pool since then, so don't worry if you're concerned. When I first met her, she was smoking up a storm, super skinny, emaciated, would party all the time. I even went outside one time and saw her boyfriend, Paul, different Paul than the one that led to the Lord, really aggressive, got into a fight, started screaming at her, throws his cell phone on the ground and explodes, and is about ready to slap her before we step in. And we're like, whoa, 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 you know, we need to deal with this. And she was making some terrible life choices. She came to our school, she was there for 2 months, and then she left. And then 4 months later, we have our summer term, and she comes back. And what she says is, I don't know why, but when I went home to my normal life, it felt so cold. But the love I felt here around Christians and learning English with you guys was so different that I just want to be part of this. And so she came, and then that summer she decided that she wanted to become a Christian, and radically changed. And so this is actually us baptizing her in a kiddie pool, because sometimes when people get baptized, if 2 out of 100 people are believers, you don't have a church, and you don't have a family to go to. Like, we're their family. Vicky went on actually to go to Bible college, same one that Travis and I went to, and met her husband there, and now she's actually serving the Lord, and she's working right now, and her husband's actually at seminary so that they can be doing ministry a long time. And that's not a unique story. When our students become Christians, that's oftentimes the path they go down. And the reason why is because imagine we go back to the sacrificial system, and you're the parents, and you find out that your child is not going to go to the temple anymore. In their culture, they cut them off. They say, I'm not going to give you an inheritance. I'm not going to help you pay for your college. I'm not going to talk to you. They might even kick them out of the house. So what makes this moment so powerful is before Vicky did that, she counted the cost and she knew this would cost her family. Wow. But Jesus was more valuable than that. And our hope is when our students get that they're able to live out the gospel so that one day their families see the difference. And we're starting to see that. It's been a couple of years, and we're seeing students who are seeing their family members say, wow, my other children who go to the temple, they don't have a relationship with me. But even though I cut my children off, they kept coming back. And I don't have students, I don't have many, if any I know of, that made a decision for baptism and turned away from the Lord. It cost them something. And so that's why we do what we do. And so, one of the things that we do every time we talk about Taiwan, we talk about missions, is we like to take a moment and have you guys think through how you're working with God. Whether you're involved with your church here, or whether this is kind of an off thing for you and just randomly showed up and it's kind of weird or a little heavy at moments, right? We believe it's so important that you guys ask God what you can invest your life and your resources into. Now, I'm a support raising missionary, so we love it when people support us. That keeps us on the field. But our heart is that everybody here is faithfully giving to their church and to missions. But not just financially, your time, your life. Because at the end of the day, I think a lot of us don't count the cost, and we don't get all in. And that keeps us from ever progressing in our faith. And so we love this little model here. And this is kind of how it works. Is I, as the missionary, came to you. And as a missionary, I ask God for provision. And I invite you guys to have a conversation with God about with the resources He's given you, your time, your money, your future. What are you going to invest that in? And I would ask that you guys prayerfully consider, is missions something I should do? Is ministry something I should do? I don't want to guilt you into that, because it's very easy to feel guilty and enter into ministry, or it's very easy to feel guilty and give to missions. That's not what the Bible asks. It wants cheerful people who give and cheerful people who serve. But rather ask that you just look at your life and you say, in light of what God's done in my life, in light of the life He's given me, in light of the resources He's given me, what does that demand in terms of just love and in terms of just caring? Lots of you are going to live lives doing a ton of cool stuff, normal jobs. I mean, my job's a little weird. It's not the norm. Lots of you will not be in full-time ministry, and that's totally okay. But what's not okay is not being involved and not interacting with God and community and other Christians, because that's going to keep you and that's going to help you grow. And so that's what I do, and that's a little bit about my presentation. And I just want to pray, and then afterwards, if you guys got questions, we can always answer those. But thank you guys for being attentive. I just really hope that you guys really consider that there's so many things to do. And there's lots of opportunities anywhere. I'm sure anybody from Woodlawn to Jefferson to Taiwan have ways that we could talk about stuff like that. But we're also here for different things. I'm here temporarily, but I mean, I'm 31, but I know when I was going through college and when I was younger, there's a lot of stuff I was going through. And anything from wisdom to just somebody praying for me to just somebody to ask questions about could go down a long way. So, let me pray. Father, I thank you, God, for this group, and I thank you for them being attentive, and I just pray that they really, really grasp how important your mission is. I pray that they're faithfully giving to their church and to what you're doing around the world, but I pray that none of that comes from guilt, but a cheerful thing. I pray, God, that you would bless them, that would show them that the best life is lived with disciple. And pray, God, that as they go through college and as they meet and as they just have times like this together, I pray, God, that there'd be a little bit of just questioning of the soul of how they can align themselves with what you want for them. And I trust, God, that you've got a beautiful plan for everyone here. And I hope that there's amazing things in their future. And I just pray that wherever they go from here or whatever they do, that they'd be honoring you and that we'd be constantly turning back to you and saying, how can I dig deeper into this relationship with you, into times with you, and into looking at the needs that are on the world. Amen. Any questions?